So in this episode, we're going to be talking about pilot issues on private jets. And we're going to be taking a preliminary report that just came out of an incident that happened in Telluride, which is one of the highest elevation airports in the United States and also in the world. Now, my name is Fabrizio Poli. Welcome to Biz Jet TV. If you've never been here before on this channel, I encourage you to have a look around. Lots of videos here, over 1,000 videos we've produced over the years about private aviation, interviews with lots of owners and how they use the jet as a business tool. I'm an airline transport pilot myself, flown thousands of hours on private jets and also for a number of different airlines. I'm also the author of the book, The Quantum Economy. More about my book if you click on the link below. I'm also the co-founder of Flight TV Network, which is a new venture which we're launching in November this year. So to find out about that, you can go to flighttvnetwork.com and find out about our new venture, this new streaming channel all about aviation and space. Straight from your TV, tablet, smartphone, whatever it may be. But anyway, let's get into the episode today. We're going to be looking at Telluride Airport, which is in Colorado. It's high up, it's a beautiful airport in the Rocky Mountains. It's an elevation of just over 9,000 feet, which is very, very high. Now, this incident happened in July 20th of last year. So, you know, in the summer, it gets hot. And when you've got high temperature and you've got a high elevation airport, you know, the density of the air changes. And so you require more runway for takeoff and landing. Now, this incident that happened was a Hawker 900 XP, nice airplane. They no longer build them, but you can still, you know, buy them pre-owned, refurbish them. They are built like a tank, as I say, so they do last a long time and spare parts are available. So, you know, there's really nothing wrong with the airplane. The aircraft was on a positioning flight. They dropped the passengers off. They were on their way back home. So the pilots got onto the runway. According to the runway performance, the runway was 7,111 feet long and they required between 6,800 to 6,900 feet. They're just pilots on board and 1,253 gallons of fuel. So as you can see, the runway is 7,100 feet long. They require 6,900 feet to take off with flaps 15. So they're right there on the edge with, you know, that amount of fuel and no passengers. So that just gives you an idea of the scenario. You know, we had, you know, high temperature in the summer up at, you know, a high elevation. So they get on the runway, they start going down the runway. And basically, once they get to 75% of their takeoff speed, they've already gone past half of the runway. So they've consumed half of the runway already. So the pilots decide to reject the takeoff at this point. So they reject the takeoff and brakes, thrust reversers, air brakes, and the aircraft doesn't seem to stop in time, goes off to the right of the runway and off the runway. Aircraft stops, everybody gets out, no one's hurt, but, you know, we had this event. Now, when they investigated, they discovered that the flaps had not been set to 15. So this explains why. So the next question I asked myself, why weren't the flaps set to 15? Now, what pilots should be doing, and this is my criticism towards the private jet world, and I'll go into another story in a minute about this. And as you can see, you know, from the footage you've been seeing here, you know, aircraft coming into Telluride, taking off from Telluride, you are in the middle of the mountains. So I understand even when you get in the air, and if you have a problem, you may have a challenge. But what we do as pilots, or what pilots should be doing, is before takeoff, they should brief. And the briefing goes like this. It's, you know, if we have any failures below 80 knots, we stop for anything. Between 80 knots and V1, which is the decision speed, we'll stop for engine fire, engine failure, anything non-flyable, or obstructions on runway. Otherwise, we get to V1, we have a failure, we'll take off, we take the problem into the air. Remember, airplanes are built to fly. Airplanes behave better in the air than on the ground. So you take the problem into the air, and then when you take the problem into the air, you have to have a plan where you're going to go. Are you going to fly straight till you hit a certain altitude? Are you going to turn left, right away? You have to have what's called an escape route. So you have to have a plan. As I say, prior planning prevents poor performance. The 5 Ps. So you have to plan, and your briefing says that. Okay, so we're going to stop for these reasons before these certain speeds. If not, we're going to take the problem into the air. And that's the briefing. And during the briefing, you say, we're taking off with flaps 15, require this amount of runway. These are the speeds for takeoff. That should be part of your briefing. Okay. And then when you run your checklist, if you are doing the checklist will, at a certain point in the checklist, it will say your flaps. You put your flaps to 15. The other pilot confirms the flaps are 15. And then later on in the checklist, you'll check the flap position. You'll check it where the lever is, you check the indicator. And this should be done a number of times if you're running the checklist and if you're doing the briefings correctly. So I reckon what happened here, there was no briefing and they weren't doing the checklist, or they weren't doing them properly. They were kind of in a rush or just messing around because they had no passengers. I don't know. I don't know these pilots, but it's clearly, to me, that there's a standard operating procedure problem here. Either the pilots weren't following the standard operating procedures, or there were no standard operating procedures. So these are really, really important things. And this is why you need to be very careful when you choose your pilots. And I tell everybody, and I won't stop saying this, the pilots are far more important than the airplane. Okay? So this is really, really important to understand. You need to get your pilots right. And that, in the private jet world, often they get the pilots wrong. Then once you've got your pilots right, the next thing you need to get right is your pilot training. So, too many people, when they buy a private jet, they say, I'm buying a Hawker 900 XP, I need type-rated pilots in the Hawker 900 XP. Now you're restricting your vision to just pilots that are qualified on that aircraft. I can tell you, for you to go out and spend $30,000 or $40,000 on a pilot's type rating, but find the right pilot that won't have this kind of thing happen, because then the aircraft got damaged. So the aircraft gets damaged, it's on the ground, then they need to repair it. And then when you go to resell the aircraft, because it's got damage history, it's going to be worth less. So you calculate all that, the downtime, the spare parts, the repair, and the value of the aircraft going down because of the incident. It's a lot more money than paying for a type rating for a couple of pilots. So you need to get your pilots right. You need to get your pilot training right. Don't send your pilots to the simulator once a year, as a lot of private jet operators do. Do what the airlines do. Send them twice a year. There's a reason why the airline standards and the airline safety record is 9.2 times higher than the private jet operations. I talk about this at length in my book, The Quantum Economy. If you're going to do this private jet thing, you've got to do it properly. If you can afford $3-4 million to buy a jet, or maybe even more, you've got to get your pilots right. Otherwise, this kind of thing happens. And this is happening over and over again. And I've been talking about it here on Biz Jet TV. And you look at the accidents, you can quite clearly see what the problem is. Now, I've got a friend of mine I flew with years ago. He recently, over the years, became an instructor and examiner in the A320, the A330, and also in the Falcon 7X and 8X. And he's currently instructing in the simulator, both in the Airbus and on the 7X and the 8X. And he told me, he said, Fabrizio, these private jet pilots, they're terrible. I would never, ever, even if I had $1 billion, ever fly on a private jet as a passenger. Because these people are really, really dangerous. And I train them in the simulator. Very few of them know what they're doing. And this is the type of thing that happens. They go into an airport where the elevation is 9,000 feet in the summer, and they forget to set the flaps for takeoff. It's not that they didn't forget, they didn't do their briefing and they didn't do their checklist. Because the briefing, both pilots would have talked about the flap setting, and by doing the checklist, the flap setting would have come up. And that's why this happened. And I see this happen over and over again. And no one seems to be doing anything about it. And I get people ring me up because they want to charter a jet and they're trying to drive the price down. And I tell people, I say, with me, you get safe. You don't get cheap. You want to get cheap, go on those fancy apps, buy yourself an empty leg, and good luck. Because the safety record is 9.2 times worse than with the airlines. And I told a client a few weeks ago, he was going on and on and on about these flights, so less than $100,000, blah, blah, blah. And I said to him, okay, very simple. I found your solution is $123,000, but it's safe. If you found the solution under $100,000, I can guarantee you 100% it's not going to be safe. And if you want to spend that less than $100,000, fly commercial, don't fly private. If you're going to fly private, I'm not interested. Go and do it with another broker. I'm not doing business with you. There's no way am I having one of these incident accidents happening on my watch. And I know this industry well. I've been flying since I was a kid. I was 15 when I started flying. I'm 55 now. I've been around airplanes a long time. I've seen a lot of people die, unfortunately, even some friends. And, at the end of the day, pilot selection, pilot training, briefings, standard operating procedures, ways of flying the airplane and that are really, really important. That's how you prevent certain things from happening. So this is really, really important. So this is what happened here in this incident, and many more we've talked about here. Another problem that's been happening a lot even with the airlines, but also with private jet operations, is pilot fatigue. And I talk about this in part 1 of my video on pilot fatigue, which I encourage you to go and have a look at. In particular, if you're looking at buying the airplane, spend more time on understanding the whole pilot thing. Okay, if you want to get on a call with me, get on a call and I can look at your scenario, look at, what airplane you need or where you need to go on business, what your plans are, your budget and whatever, and we can come up with a plan. But I can tell you, the pilots are more important. And I only hire pilots that I know. I go through my network. I don't have to advertise. I just pick the phone up. And if it's not a friend of mine, it's a friend of a friend. And I know these people have a good character, good training, good background. They may not be typewritten in the airplane you're going to buy, but as I said before, what's $40,000 compared to the damage that this airplane had, and the value that it's lost because of now having damage history. So that's all from me on this episode of Biz Jet TV. So check out this video about pilot fatigue. Remember, get yourself a copy of The Quantum Economy and go to our website, flighttvnetwork.com. Put your email address in there because we're launching in November. We'll be sending you on email special offers on our pre-launch. And that's all from Fabrizio Poli here on Biz Jet TV. And I'll see you on the next one.